And thanks so much, everybody, for sharing. It's just, always learning and happy to be with all of you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take about 10 minutes, hopefully shorter, to just continue a lot of what we were talking about last week, it sounds like, and move us into this question of the present moment. And I'm going to go fast. I'm going to throw a lot of information out, but then hopefully we'll have some time to have Q&A and do breakout sessions and really digest it. But I just want to get a lot out. So first, I want to ground us in this moment. So this is an image of the National Guard on Kent State University. And I want to talk, in moments where the National Guard has descended on the city that I live in and in many of the cities that we all live in sort of white supremacist terror. In the wake of campus activism in the UC system, which is where I work, in the 1960s and 1970s. So we have the Black Power movement on campus, we have the Black Panthers on campus, we have the Brown Berets, we have the feminist movement, we have the anti-Vietnam War movement, right? So the UC system, systems across the country, but I'm going to talk about the University of California system, erupts in protest, right? The person who was the governor of California at the time is somebody many of you may be familiar with. His name is Ronald Reagan. He went on to be president, right? But he was governor of California at the time. And he stepped in, and up until this point, the University of California system was tuition free. It was mostly attended by white men, some white women, but it was tuition free. And in this radical campus activism of the 60s and 70s, in part what was happening, right, is Black and brown communities saying, we want in to these public goods. We want in to these amazing universities that you have created, right, essentially for white people. We want in. Ronald Reagan, as governor, says, fine. You want in, it's no longer free. Now, families have to pay tuition. So literally, as Black and brown people are demanding access to historically white colleges and universities, right? In this case, the UC system, that's when tuition, read, student debt, kicks in, right? And so I just wanted to bring us into this moment of the National Guard descending on our cities, the National Guard descending on our campuses, UCLA using one of its Jackie Robinson Stadium, right, as a place to process protesters, just to talk about how profoundly these struggles are connected. So that's where I want to start. And then what I'm going to do is, it sounds like I'm going to do a lot of really quick review about some of the concepts that were introduced last time, including racial capitalism, specifically as it relates to student debt, and then bring us into contemporary organizing, right? So you all know student debt has quadrupled just in the last 15 years. It stands today at $1.6 trillion. So in 2018, US students graduated with an average of $30,000 in debt. Sorry, motorcycles as well. And there are 1 million new defaults per year. Somebody already said it in the go round, right? There are millions of us, right? There are literally 1 million new people stop paying every year. Imagine that union, right? Between 1964 to 2019, the average annual cost of attending a 4-year public college or university, and remember, public used to mean that it was tuition free, soared by 3,819%. This is public colleges. So often a lot of people talk about how bad for-profit colleges are, and that's right, but let's be very clear about what has happened to formerly public school in this country as well, right? But of course, when we talk about student debt, which is a systemic problem, we also have to talk about predatory inclusion, which is a concept that I'll share, and I'm sure many of you know, and many of you may not, so I'll introduce it, and racial capitalism, which it sounds like came up last time, right? Predatory inclusion. Black and brown communities demand access to a formerly free service, in this case, higher education, and they are included, but on a predatory basis, which is now to say, yeah, but your family's gonna go into debt for it. You can be included, right? But only if you literally go into unsustainable debt. So student debt and household indebtedness in general, right? So the debt collective organizes around student debt. We also organize around criminal legal fines and fees. We also organize around medical debt, right? Trying to understand these as systemic. So student debt, household indebtedness more broadly is systemic, but it's not evenly distributed, right? So we can keep those things in our head at the same time. Mass indebtedness has profoundly deepened pre-existing racial and gendered inequalities in the United States, right? You learned that last week, always bears repeating. And again, one of the concepts that's really useful here is this concept of predatory inclusion. Women are organizing to get access to public goods, right? Black and brown communities organizing to get access to public goods. But what are the terms? Financial actors offer the needed services to Black and brown households, but on exploitative terms that limit or eliminate their long-term benefit. In other words, yeah, you got a college degree, right? But now you can't pay for it. Now you can't get a wage that allows you to live the kind of life that you wanted to live. So how do we think about racial capitalism, predatory inclusion, and student debt? Again, I know Jaleel went over this last week, but for those of you who weren't there and for all of us again, so 63% of white graduates from public school borrow, 81% of Black graduates borrow. After graduating, 4 years after graduating, Black graduates have average loan balances more than twice that of their white counterparts, and more than half of African-American households under 40 have student debt, more than half. More than half of Black borrowers and 44% of Latinx borrowers are either in default or delinquent on their loans. Why? So many reasons, just to name a couple. We have discrimination in the labor market. We have gender and racial wage gaps. And we also, of course, have differential access to intergenerational wealth, right? Did your parents have enough money to send you to college? Did their grandparents before them have enough money, right? Who has access to intergenerational wealth in this country? Okay, so that's how a few numbers with which to think about student debt and racial capitalism. And again, I know that's a review from last week. So what do we learn? Student debt is a systemic condition, which means that it is not the individual failure of those who make poor choices in a fair system, right? Millions of people default every year. It is not that every one of those millions of people made a poor choice. On the contrary, right? This is a systemic failure. Racial capitalism is also a systemic condition, right? So the disproportionate burden of household debt on Black, brown, and Native households is not the individual failure of those who make poor choices in a fair system, right? These communities don't need financial literacy, which is so often touted to them, right? Systemic conditions require collective responses. They do not require individualized responses like financial literacy, right? So then the question is, well, what kind of collective responses are possible, right? And that's what we at the Debt Collective and so many other people, right? This is the question that we have been trying and had some success in answering. And our answer has been a debtors union. And if you look in the back, in the center of that photo, you see Sanders. Hey, Sanders. And this was at a Debt Collective retreat that I think Jacques actually was part of, and probably Thomas too, in Florida a few years back, right? So at the Debt Collective, we organize debtors unions, and this is a photo of many of the people who were part of our first debtors union. And this was a union of people who had held student debts from for-profit colleges in particular. And it's so nice to see and hear from so many of you who are in the room today. I love still using that language of in the room, right? So the demand of this first debtors union, people who held debts from for-profit colleges, was abolish all of the debt, right? None of this debt forgiveness language as if they had done something bad and needed to be forgiven, right? Cancel the debt, abolish the debt. But canceling all the debt and still having to pay for college once all the debt is canceled does not help us solve the problem, right? Because then people will just go into debt all over again. If you're going to cancel student debt, you also have to make public college free again, right? So that was the demand that the initial debtors union made. Cancel all the student debt and make public college, like the University of California system, among many others, free again, right? But not just free for white people, no. So here's like a visual representation of what a debtors union can do, right? Alone, so many people said, we did the go around today, right? I'm so glad to know I'm not alone. It's helpful to be on this call and realize that so many people are in this same condition, right? So because alone, our debts are a burden. Alone, Great Lakes is calling us. Alone, we don't want to answer the phone, or we don't want to open that envelope, right? But together, they make us powerful, which is to say that if the big fish is the debt collector and the debt collector is coming after all of us and we're disorganized, that shit is scary as hell. But look how many of us organized, we are bigger than the debt collector, right? So if we can get organized, we are able to change the dynamic of debtor and creditor, right? Change the power dynamic. And that's what debtors unions are out to do. Sometimes it helps to hear it from somebody who has been made fabulously wealthy off of racial capitalism. So here's J.P. Getty, right? So take it from him. We've always used this quote. J.P. Getty, old oil tycoon, he says, you know, if you owe the bank $100, that's your problem. But if you owe the bank $100 million, that's the bank's problem, which is to say, student debtors collectively have $1.6 trillion of leverage over the federal government, right? We own that bank. Now, there are some wrinkles because this actually isn't a bank, this is the federal government, and we can talk about what that means for organizing, but it's just a kind of useful quote, again, to flip the script of the power relationships of debtor and creditor. So here is a picture of the original, what were called the Corinthian 15, right? So the first student debtors union in the history of the US. These 15 people came, I mean, we did a bunch of organizing and a bunch of legal training and media training and story sharing, right, over many, many months, and in-person retreats, which was such a wonderful luxury. I didn't realize it was, but to have had then. And they went public, the 15 of them saying, as you see, to the Department of Education, to the loan servicers, to the Genesis Lending Company, to Corinthian and ECMC, we have one thing to say: we owe you nothing, right? Debt abolition and free public college. And you'll actually see a wonderful video that the Corinthian 15 has put together for this political education workshop, and hear more about the Corinthian 15 next week. So what happened? Now, granted, I'm talking about a story over about 4 years, but check out this Facebook post, right? Here's Randy, a member of this union, Facebook posting, I got my money back from what I paid toward my federal student loans. And you can see she's holding a check from the United States government for $2,243. So not only was all of her debt abolished, she also got the money back that she had paid in installments, right? To date, this union, which is specific to people who hold debts from for-profit colleges, has generated $1.5 billion in debt abolition. $1.5 billion, which is to say, debtor organizing can work. Debtors unions can work. Now, the strategies and tactics we have for people who hold debts from for-profit colleges are going to be different from the people who hold debts from other kinds of colleges and universities, but that should not deter us, right? I trust in the power of this group and all of the groups making, that we can figure out the right tactics and strategies, and that's obviously why all of us are here today. So, in addition to that $1.5 billion, what else happened? So you can see Thomas Goki, who is here with us in the background on the right side of the screen. You can also, many of you may know Representative Ilhan Omar from Minnesota, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez standing behind her to the left, Pramila Jayapal to the right, and Pam Hunt, another member of the Debt Collective, to the left. So for literally 4 years, the Debt Collective First Debtors Union had been saying, what are our demands? Full student debt abolition and free college for all. And guess what? Organizing not only works in getting your money back or in getting your debt canceled, but it also works to potentially change laws. So this is Ilhan Omar in Washington, D.C., announcing a bill that she and Pramila Jayapal wrote to do, guess what? Cancel all the debt and make public college free again. And they invited Debt Collective members, again, you see Pam here on the left and Thomas here on the right, because organizing works. So I want to introduce you to this legislation, which is currently proposed federal legislation, again, written by Ilhan Omar and Pramila Jayapal. Here's what it does. It would eliminate $1.6 trillion in outstanding student debt for 45 million borrowers. It would eliminate tuition and fees at all public 2- and 4-year colleges and universities, community colleges, trade schools, and apprenticeship programs. It would provide funding streams to historically Black colleges and universities and tribal colleges. And it would also make that funding, and we're talking about federal government funding here, contingent on university working conditions. So for those of you who have been in and out of universities, you know, so much of the university labor, intellectual labor, is now what are called sort of adjunct or insecure professors. And this legislation says, if your state wants this money to fund its public system, the jobs that you have there for professors and other people have to be good jobs. No more of this outsourcing, no more of this adjunct exploitative labor, right? So Bernie Sanders eventually picked up College for All and endorsed it as a senator, and this was a sort of this was a central part of his presidential campaign. So there's College for All. And I'm almost done, but I want to share, and there's Bernie Sanders, indeed. So Pam spoke at this press conference in DC. Oh, I realize I need to share my computer sound. Let me do that. I want to play you Pam's words. So again, this is Pam Hunt, debt collective member in Washington, DC, announcing this legislation.
Hello, my name is Pam Hunt. I have $212,000 of student debt, $51,000 of which is interest alone. I stand before you as a person who pursued a higher degree and was made worse off because of it. I'm a proud single parent, and like so many parents, I have worked hard to make sure that my children have the best lives that they can have. I came to Washington, D.C. in 2015 as one of the first student debt strikers in U.S. history. We organized for years, and as a result, some debtors won relief, although I haven't. Over the last 4.5 years, I have struggled financially due to my student debt burden. I lost my home and nearly lost my life in a fight against cancer. But you know what I haven't lost? These illegitimate and immoral student loans that are still haunting me. You know what else I also haven't lost? I haven't lost myself or my desire to fight. I am here to fight, no matter how long it takes, for full debt cancellation and an education system that treats us with dignity and as equals. An education system that's worth fighting for. Right now, many people are not paying back their student loans because they cannot afford to. I've heard that we can't afford to let people go to school for free, but from where I stand, we can't afford not to. I have 3 daughters who, within the past 4 years, have graduated from college with Bachelor of Science degrees. Each is starting life with $50,000 plus in student loan debt. None of them are employed in their field of study, and all of them are on income-based repayment because their income doesn't afford them the ability to make monthly payments. That's just my 3 daughters.
Okay, sorry that cut off, but I'm just going to end it here now, right? So this demand for full student debt cancellation, many of you have probably know about it already. Many of you have even probably read up on the sort of debates around it. People oppose it for a variety of reasons. So I just want to share 2 of the arguments and a couple of the authors that you might look up, right? Who make the argument, and these are some academic arguments, but they're translated, right? Why it is that full debt cancellation, rather than partial debt cancellation, right? This was one of the sort of big differences between, say, a Bernie Sanders campaign and an Elizabeth Warren campaign, right? Why it is that full debt cancellation is the way to go for racial justice in particular. So here's economist Darek Hamilton and public health Professor Naomi Zood saying, quote, "Only full cancellation completely protects the vulnerabilities of Black students and students in general, while at the same time establishing higher education as a universal right," right? Which is what many people here said on this call, "and offering restitution to all those who have had to rely on debt finance," right? All of us here have had to rely on debt finance. At the same time, it is disproportionately Black and brown communities who have had to rely on debt finance precisely because that intergenerational wealth is much less likely, right, to be passed on through their families. So just one other argument for full debt cancellation. This is from Marshall Steinbaum. It used to be, he's saying, that once student debt was a marker of relative privilege in the labor market, right? You had student debt because you went to law school, or you had student debt because you went to medical school, or you had student debt because you went to dental school, right? So it was confined to high status graduate degree holders, and they are disproportionately white and have been historically. But now, Marshall Steinbaum's research says, it is actually increasingly, that is, student debt is increasingly a mark of relative lack of privilege, right? It is no longer that all this debt is coming because people get law degrees or dental degrees or medical degrees, right? This is because Anybody who is demanding in to a college education right now is going into deep debt. And therefore, the more debt cancellation there is, the more racial wealth inequality is reduced, right? So two powerful arguments for debt cancellation and racial justice, and I'm happy to guide people toward those readings. So finally, I just want to say that the Debt Collective is not alone in organizing for this stuff. So I'll present you, many of you have heard of the Red Nation. It's an indigenous socialist organization, and they put out a 3-part document called the Red Deal. You can find it very easily online. It's a response to the Green New Deal. But I just want to point out one of their demands. There it is, free education for everyone, right? So the Red Nation proposing this in their Red Deal. Again, a fabulous 3-part document that I would really encourage everybody to look out for and to follow the Red Nation, really inspiring indigenous socialist organization. And finally, the Movement for Black Lives put out a policy platform many years ago. And the first plank in their reparations demands were free public college. But this is actually just from this last Wednesday, right? So again, to end by grounding us in this exact moment and what is not only possible, but what is necessary in this moment. So last week was Movement for Black Lives Week of Action. Many of us probably participated in it. They had structured, deeply organized demands for every day. So I'm gonna end by reading the Movement for Black Lives Wednesday demands. We demand immediate relief for our communities. We demand the federal government provide direct cash payments, rent cancellation, mortgage cancellation, a moratorium on utility and water shutoffs, and a cancellation of student, medical, and other forms of debt. We demand long-term economic solutions like a universal basic income in order to address the immediate crisis and pave the way for a just recovery that doesn't prioritize corporations and leave our communities behind. Support the families and the lives of those we have lost and those struggling to survive now. And for those who didn't know about the Movement for Black Lives Week of Action, I have the URL down there at the bottom, and I would really recommend that you look through the Monday through Friday demands. You'll actually see many that are relevant to what we're discussing here today. And I will leave it at that and turn it over to Thomas.